Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe and welcome to Club E. I am your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today we are talking about creating employee ownership through selling your company to an ESOP. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, Schwegman, Lumberg, Woosner, an intellectual property law firm, and Voyager U, a catalytic gateway for growing your independent work life. Catch Club E on your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and many others. All right, with that, I want to introduce Club E's partner today, Sue Crockett, Executive Director of the Minnesota Center for Employee Ownership. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Rick. And it's a pleasure to be back on Club E. We appreciate the opportunity to share the story about employee ownership. Like you said, I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Center for Employee Ownership, and we are part of a larger organization called Employee Ownership Expansion, whose mission is to create these centers throughout the country, and Minnesota is one of them. And what we do is we are an unbiased source on all forms of employee ownership. And we can provide resources to company stories like you're hearing today, and from the professionals that serve these different industries and different options. So today, before I introduce the panel, we're excited to share a story about HM Craig and an acquisition of a company that brought them into that ESOP and made those employees employee owners. So I will let the panel introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves, and I'll start with Tony.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Tony Wand. I'm President, CEO of HM Craig, and I've been here about just coming up on 8 years now, and we're a 95-person ESOP based in Minneapolis.
And Tim?
Hello, I'm Tim Foley. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at HM Craig. I've been in kind of an industrial sales and marketing for my entire career, mostly electrical products, and I've been with HM Craig 7 years.
And Kurt.
Good afternoon. I'm Kurt Uhlir. I'm the former founder, owner, and president of Standby Power System Consultants located in Chicago, Illinois, until the acquisition by HM Craig almost 4 years ago. I am an electrical engineer by trade, and I'm currently the business development manager and senior technical advisor for HM Craig.
Great. And Kevin?
Hello, everyone. Kevin Weise, First International Bank and Trust. We're honored to serve as the ESOP trustee for HM Craig. I've got 40 years in the retirement plan institutional business, and we're honored to be on the call today.
Great. Well, I hope you enjoy this story about how you have an option of selling your company to an ESOP and still benefiting as an owner, but then bringing your employees in and making them employee owners as well. So I will turn it over to Rick to start with his questions.
Yeah, and thanks again, Sue, for participating in the session today and for organizing this. I know that Club E has partnered with you a couple of times now on the ESOP content side of things, so appreciate all your support and your participation in the Club E community. All right, Tony, let's start with you. Maybe give a little backstory to the audience about your journey to being an ESOP, and then how does it come up with potential acquisition candidates that HM Craig is an ESOP, and how does that figure into the conversations that you have with folks like Kurt?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So HM Craig is about 52, 53 years old, and we started as an ESOP in 1995, became a 100% ESOP in 2005. We have about 95 people currently, have grown. We've kind of doubled that in the last 5 to 7 years, and so that's how we got here. So we're about 20 plus years old as an ESOP. You know, starting a discussion, you know, like with the Kurts of the world who are selling their business, it's actually pretty easy to talk about an ESOP because it's a very exciting story. There's whatever, less than 10,000 ESOPs across the country. And so we're blessed and honored to be one of those, because it is an exciting story. So it's pretty easy to get to the punchline pretty quick about an ESOP. And when there's a willing buyer and seller, both parties have to do their due diligence. And I think Kurt was a perfect example of what we were looking for, because obviously there's an exit strategy and kind of a financial reason why a seller has an exit strategy. But if it's not 1B, it's number 2 for sure, that they want to know what's going to happen to their employees after the sale, and to be able to tell them that they're going to become an employee owner on day 1 is a pretty exciting story. So it's easy to start. And so part of our due diligence is, if that doesn't come up pretty quickly with the seller, then it may not be a good culture fit. But in Kurt's case, it was perfect. I mean, we talked about that from day 1.
Well, thanks for sharing your journey, Tony. And with that, Kurt, let's jump over to you. Maybe talk a little bit about a brief description of your company, and then what factored into your decision to put your company on the market to sell when you did, and then also sell to an ESOP.
Thank you, Rick. Well, the company, Standby Power System Consultants, was founded and started in 1997, and it was started as an engineering, consulting, procurement, installation, maintenance, and testing company for critical power systems, specifically large stationary battery systems, which act as the stored energy source for backup power needs for customers like electric utility, information communication technologies companies, ICTs, which would include data centers, cellular wireless sites, telecommunication facilities, and mission critical sites. So what led me to really want to sell the company was a number of things, but a lot of it came down to exit strategy, getting to a point in my life where I wanted to back off from the day-to-day running of the business, and I wanted to also make sure that we were partnering ourselves with somebody that would be able to sustain the company and grow the company. So that was some very important things. And also, I think there was a lot of it, as far as the growth is concerned, is that I felt that I brought the company to a point where I really needed some new blood to continue the growth of that company. The last part of your question, Rick, was how did I come to deciding on an ESOP company? Well, there was a lot of things to consider. We wanted to find a company to sell to that would preserve and grow the legacy of the company, of course, and also wanted to find a company that had the fundamentals same fundamentals that we kind of were created and operated on. I wanted, obviously we were looking for sustainability and security and long-term growth for the employees, and that Tony had alluded to that earlier, but that was a very, very, and probably one of the most important aspects of it. Sure, you want to make sure there's fair and equitable value for the company, but I had employees that were with me for a very, very long time, and my probably biggest concern and thing that I wanted to make sure was that they were going to be taken care of in the long run.
All right. Thanks for sharing that story, and I'm sure that's interesting and valuable to our listening audience out there. So thanks again. Kevin, let's jump to you, given that you're on the financing side of things. As someone who's been involved with over 75 ESOP transactions, what do you see are the characteristics of companies that best fit the ESOP model?
Thanks, Rick. First International Bank and Trust serves as ESOP trustee for a number of clients. Our first obligation is to represent the employee owners of the company. We also are entrusted with monitoring the activities of the board and senior management. So we leave the day-to-day analysis of these types of transactions to the board and senior management and a number of our advisors, legal, financial advisors, accounting. But we want to ensure the transaction terms are fair, they're reasonable, and there's the opportunity to add value to the beneficial shareholder, which is the employee owner of the company. So at the end of the day, we want to be able to talk to employee owners and say, this is a good transaction. It will grow the value of the company, and it will enhance your ESOP participant account as you are a long-term employee owner of the company.
All right, thank you very much for sharing that. Tim, let's bounce to you. So when you folks are looking at acquisitions, what measures do you assess to determine if the potential acquisition is a good fit and beneficial to all of your current existing employee owners?
Yeah, that's a good question. We work on, obviously, any acquisition needs to be accretive. The net income needs to be higher post-acquisition than it was before. That's obvious. But as an ESOP, you're also adding employees to the equation. And so you get employee owners that are buying essentially another company that will produce more employee owners. So you got to make sure that it's a fair deal, I guess, for the employees. And we take a look at, we allocate shares on the basis of compensation. So the number of shares a person gets is a fraction that's calculated by their W-2 divided by the sum of the W-2s. And so we take a look at EBITDA, the dollars of EBITDA versus the dollars of salary and wage of the target company, and compare that to our own to make sure that we're not going to onboard a bunch of employees that are going to seriously dilute the pool of shares that the employees will get. We want the share price to go up, and we want the shares to go up at least as much, so the employee owners that bought this company benefit from the earnings and that come from that company. So it's a little different than just your pure EBITDA play that a PE firm would use. So we look at another factor to make sure it's right for the owners who are our employees.
And then as far as that goes, internally, so you have a team working on these things and you're all on board with the process and assessing the same set of attributes?
That's correct. Yeah, we put together an acquisition team. It's usually Tony, me, and a couple of other people. And we build a model, a 5-year forecast of what we think will happen given the historical financials that the potential partner has given us. And then we make some assumptions around EBITDA, and we make some assumptions around the investments that we'll make, because we usually are going to do something. Just buying something to hold it isn't very valuable. The combination should be more than the sum of the two parts, and we're looking for those types of activities. And then and that's really what drives our process. We put together a financial model and we determine what we think the company's earnings will be, the target's earnings will be once we buy it, and that determines the share price, the purchase price based on a multiple of EBITDA and a couple other models. The beauty of us is that we're an ESOP, and so we have a very high quality valuation firm that teaches us how to do valuations.
All right. So Tony, let's jump over to you. When you come across companies that you're considering for an acquisition, when you meet people like Kurt, what are the steps that you take to explain the benefits of an ESOP when onboarding that company and those management participants? Because it's not something that everybody just intuitively knows. So how do you go about explaining the benefits and then onboarding folks?
Yeah, no, that it's your point's valid. You know, there aren't many ESOPs across the country, and so even defining what ESOP stands for and what it means is where you start. But, so depending on, the level, when you're starting with the owner, it's a different discussion, obviously, than with the employees, after the fact. But, it's just depending on the level of knowledge. And, I think Kurt knew enough about ESOPs, but, then it really becomes, what does it mean for, his employees and things like that. And then when you talk to the actual employees, when it becomes known, whether it's right before or right after the merger or acquisition, typically the first thing you do is to calm their fears that this is a good thing. You have to tell them that, your job's good and, this is a good thing and you're an employee owner now. And it doesn't mean that you can show up at all the board meetings and all that kind of stuff, but it does mean that you're an employee owner. And as the company goes, your retirement, your wealth management, benefits appropriately. And probably the big thing is a lot of people say, well, is this a payroll deduction? Well, it's not a payroll deduction. We just give you shares of stock. And when the shares of stock go up because we do well, you benefit. And, and probably the main challenge is for people to understand that, these shares of stock aren't shares that you can just buy and sell anytime. If you need Christmas money or something, it's a retirement plan, just like a 401k. But, it's a fun discussion to have. And I think when people get past okay, I've got a new owner now, then it becomes pretty exciting.
All right, so Kurt, let's go back to you. So you go through a process, you make an internal decision, it's time to sell. You make a decision that you're open to selling to an ESOP. What did you actually look for in potential buyers?
Well, when this process first started, there was a lot of called dance partners, and you got to know the company, the potential buyer, as well as the potential buyer was, getting to know us. And, the important things to look at to me was to make sure that the companies had similar cultures and values. And, once we kind of hit on that, then the rest of it became, I think, exponentially more easier because, when we started the discussion about the ESOP, and I quite honestly learned quite a bit about it. I mean, when I started the whole process, I didn't say, well, I'm looking for a company that's an ESOP company to be the buyer. That certainly wasn't the case. So Tony and Tim, really educated me a lot on the aspects and the value of being being part of an ESOP company. And the more I began to understand that, I saw what the benefits were going to be to my employees, because again, that was one of the biggest components of all this. It was how this was going to impact the employees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let's dig in a little bit deeper there. So to start with, you did not know that much about ESOPs when you started, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so now you got Tony and Tim show up on the scene. They start talking to you about ESOPs. You don't know that much about it. Talk a little bit through the education process that you had, and then talk a little bit about the added value, which ultimately tipped you their direction.
Well, and again, there was a learning curve from the knowledge I gained from both from Tim and Tony, and there was a lot of research that I did then subsequent to that to find out more about ESOP companies and what value it would bring to everybody, including myself as an employee owner. So at that point, and again, everything was pointing towards the security that the employees would have, and the growth potential. And I think one of the things that really stuck out to me that I really liked was the fact that, was the opportunity for the employees to gain equity and also be part of the success. So, I kind of looked at it as if you go out and let's say you buy a stock on the stock market. Well, yeah, you're investing in something, but you don't really have a say-so in it. In this case, as an employee owner, you have a say-so, and you will affect the success and ultimately, the growth and of the value of the stock. And I think that's really important. So the employees have an opportunity to have input and control of, how the company performs, and ultimately can control, to a certain extent, I guess, the price of the stock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Rick, I actually have if I could just add a little bit to what Kurt was saying, is one of the parts that I remember the most of kind of the early courting process was Tim and I flew down to Chicago and we went out to eat with Kurt and Kathy, Kurt's wife and the co-owners, and we went out to eat that night. We probably sat there for, I don't know what it was, 3 or 4 hours. And by the time the night was over, we all, I think, I can't speak for everybody, but we kind of collectively said, the chemistry was good and it worked well. So I think that was kind of the beginning of when we knew this was going to work, because we were able to talk about ESOPs and, and we learned what our values and, the culture was and everything. And I can't speak for anybody else, but that was important for me. And I think it worked.
Kurt, I see you nodding your head. So it worked, huh?
Yes, it did. Here we are almost 4 years later, and I think it's been a very good journey for everybody involved, and it certainly, have no regrets.
I was going to jump in if I could, because in talking to Tony, when we were putting this together, he also said that Kurt's division is the most successful, right, as far as whatever they're doing within the company. I mean, right?
Well, we're not going to tell that with Kurt on here, because he'll get a big head. But yeah, it's been wildly successful, and we've done 2 acquisitions and they're both very successful and in their own right. And but it's the Chicago Kurt's group has grown significantly in the 4 years, and it's been, I don't think we could have drawn it up any better, and it's worked great.
Well, and I was just going to say too, that as I'm just kind of observing through all of this is, the structure of all of this works. You've got Kevin looking out for the best interests of the employees in HM Craig, and you putting in an ESOP, and you have grown the successful company. But then you also are diversified, right? With an ESOP, it's a retirement plan, but then you might have a 401k program. So not all the eggs are in one basket. And so they're always looking out, I think, for the best interest of the employees all the way around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we try to do at Club E is put a heavy emphasis on the education side of things. As I mentioned on the front end of today's session, that Sue and I have put a couple of these together now on ESOPs. So one of the things that I think people can learn most from are mistakes that other folks make. So if we're looking kind of in the rear view mirror at a variety of our own experiences, and I'll go around and let everybody have an opportunity at this question. What's a common mistake that you see made, or in hindsight, you might have done differently with your own transaction? Kevin, let's start with you, kind of on the financing side and the structure side. What's a common mistake, or 2 or 3 that you see that you wish fewer people would make?
Sure, great questions, Rick. A couple of mistakes we see happen, and certainly not here, but sometimes there's a reluctance to bring in some of the other financial partners, your attorneys, your accountants, your financial advisors. Bring in the experts. These folks have done lots of transactions like this. They can add tremendous value. Ultimately, it's the board and management's decision. Do we buy a company like Kurt or not, but bring in the experts who have done this. And second, my second comment would be, make sure you communicate precisely and properly to your employee owners.
Mhm.
Our challenges and opportunities we see is it's good to communicate to the employee owners. Employee owners figure this stuff out. They know the ESOP allows them to grow their retirement account with the growth of the business. They understand dilution. They understand, Tim touched on the allocation process. The company makes cash contributions from its profits. Those cash contributions buy more shares. Now we've just added Kurt's employee group to the base. There's a dilution in share allocation, but the resulting impact should be share price will go up exponentially as it's done here with HM Craig.
Mhm.
So involve the experts and over communicate.
Mhm.
I like those. Thanks, Kevin, for sharing. Hey, Tony, why don't I have you answer that question, and then Tim will jump over to you.
Mhm. Well, I'm very pragmatic by nature. I'm an accountant, so I maybe tend to think that these types of things, like a transaction like this, is probably more black and white than it really is. And one of my big ahas, and it was both transactions we've done, but in particular Kurt's, but it's we may look at it as a buyer as, well, come on, the price is right, so let's go. And you have to put your seller hat on too and say, this is something Kurt started 20 years ago. He put his blood, sweat, and tears, and this has been his life, and he's done a lot of work, and this is a big deal. It's more than just how much money can I get and my employees being taken care of. So there's a very emotional side of it on the seller side that I didn't have sensitivity to probably, and it's just something I got to keep reminding myself that this isn't my business that I'm selling. It's somebody else is doing their their lifelong dream, and now all of a sudden they're maybe going to walk away. I mean, Kurt kind of had the best of both worlds, for 4 years now, is that he was able to do that and then still, be part of the business, which is great. We've all benefited from that.
All right, thank you. Tim.
I would say lesson learned is patience, because I would say in a couple of cases, we got to the point where this is never going to work, or you just got to stick with it. And I think somebody, maybe it's Kevin, but it didn't happen in SPSC in Kurt's case, but deals die many times before they're finally done. And that certainly has happened to us. And I'd agree, it's about communication, and frankly, experts do help, as Kevin talked about. Our first one, we had experts on our side, and the other party didn't, and it went much harder when they didn't have good advisors. So we actually try and encourage it. We're obviously talking to people all the time, and we try and encourage them to have advisors, even though our purchase price might actually go up because they have good advisors, but we'll also have a more realistic path to a deal.
Yep. Yep. And Kurt, I'm sure the transaction was done to perfection, and I'm sure there would be no firsthand experiences of anything that you would like to improve upon. However, asking for a friend, was there something that maybe you would suggest for somebody as to how they might do things maybe better than what you went through or what you knew about it going in?
Well, it's better than you think, Rick, because it was done to perfection.
He's still here.
Yeah, right. Honestly, I think the takeaways for me, and if I was, if somebody were to come to me and say, what could have been done better, or what could have you done better, or what advice you have for me, if because I'm thinking of selling my company. Preparation, that's really the big thing. And if you really, in my case, going into an unknown, I mean, I only, started one company, and I've only, sold one company. So I didn't have that experience, but to Kevin's point, surrounding yourself with the right people when you're doing it is really the key. So you really have to have a good team, and they're really acting as your advisors, and you got to trust them, and you have to listen to them. And with knowledge there's power, and that's really what I found probably to be the thing that helped us along the most. As far as life after selling the company, probably the biggest thing, and there's actually a thing called a founder's syndrome, which is an ailment that folks that once owned a business, and when they no longer own it, it's kind of something you go through. It's like you try to find your place a little bit, and because you're not the guy anymore, so that's one thing you have to prepare yourself for when you do sell a business.
Mm-hmm. Rick, I would say kind of to that point, for both the transactions, Kevin was always our first call. I mean, before we'd maybe do a little bit of math on the back of a cocktail napkin, and then we'd call Kevin and say, are we going off the rails here, or is this something that we should consider? And, Kevin's our first call. And so the trustee in this case, Kevin was invaluable. And, that's how we make sure that it works. And that's the lesson we didn't learn the hard way, because we did it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other piece of it too, I think, is the fact that, Kurt could have sold and been done, or the fact that he's able to stay within the business, and as opposed to selling it out privately or something, and all of a sudden you've got a 2-month contract or a 2-year contract, and you don't like the way they're running the company, and it's probably even more seller's remorse in that instance. But hopefully it's been a good experience for you to stay within. Yeah. Obviously it has for 4 years.
Well, it's probably worth noting that Kurt had a 2-year employment agreement, and it's now 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And besides, my wife said I had to stay.
Well, and that actually, that's a noteworthy item, because oftentimes the 2-year contract turns into 12, 18 months, and everybody kind of agrees it's in the best interest to separate. So actually it does say a lot that you're still there after 4 years, Kurt.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the other things we do at Club E is to try to kind of dig into the people that we talk to here in our sessions. And one of the questions about everybody's career journeys and arc and things they've learned along the way is something that I always find fascinating. So question, but it's a little bit more on the personal front. Was there a lesson that you learned along the way of your career that you wish you would have learned sooner? And let's see, Tony, I'm going to call on you first. So you drew the short straw here.
Oh, wow. I would, and this is what I tell my 2 working world daughters every day, is the power of networking. You can never start too early to have a good network, because there's always resources you can draw on, and knowing people from prior lives, prior companies, or whatever is just incredibly invaluable. And I never really realized that until, I don't know, not that long ago. But fortunately, I know a lot of really good people that are able to help out in my career, personally and professionally.
All right, I like that one. And that's actually part of how Club E got started. So totally agree with you on that. Tim, how about you?
I've been pondering it while Tony's talking, and so I would say I learned kind of early on in my career to ask open-ended questions and really try and listen instead of doing all the talking. And I have kind of this sales and marketing background, right? So talking's always good, but I've found if you ask open-ended questions, you're going to learn a lot more than a yes/no question. And you're also going to learn a lot more about what the person that you're communicating with is really after if you do a lot more listening to those answers.
I'm with you on that one, 100%. 2 for 2 so far. So Kevin, the pressure's on. We're 2 for 2.
Well, I'm going to go back to an old adage, Rick. I learned early on, and I think it applies not just with HM Craig, but to all of our ESOP company and great clients, primarily Upper Midwest. Treat others as you would like to be treated. For the most part, people are fair, they're reasonable, they want to do the right thing. You operate under that scenario, good things will happen, and HM Craig is a great example of that.
Well, your folks would be proud of you for that answer. So I'm with you on that one too. 3 for 3. Kurt, we've got a streak going here.
I'm going to go back to something my mother gave me about 55 years ago, and it was a little plaque, and I still have it, and it's on my dresser, about nobody's ever indispensable. And you should always remember that, and that'll help you, bring you a long way.
And then Sue, I have to ask you too, because I know when we've interacted on these different sessions that your group and Club E have collaborated on the ESOPs, I've enjoyed getting to know you and looking forward to your answer here too. So what lesson did you learn that either has carried with you for all these years or you wish you would have learned sooner?
Well, the one that stayed with me all these years is relationships. If you build good relationships with people, that they'll be there for you. And it's kind of going to Kevin, treat people the way you want to be treated, be kind, have a sense of humor. And really, this group is a testimony to that, in that I built so many great relationships over my years with the ESOP Association, that now in the work with MNCEO, I'm able to call upon them to share their story, and they take my call. So that's a nice thing about it, and I appreciate the relationships.
All right, I like that a lot. Okay, so as we aim towards the finish line on our session today, and kind of looking for a bow to wrap it all up in, and Tony, let's start with you. If there was one key takeaway you would like our audience to have regarding this topic, what would it be and why?
Mm-hmm. Oh, probably the biggest takeaway, and we haven't really talked about it too much, is these transactions take time, and Tim hit it right on the head. I think there's probably a statistic that says that every deal is off and on 3 different times, and whatever you think your close date is, you probably need to do at least 50% more, because something comes up and it just adds stress to it. So just, taking your time, be patient, and it'll all work out.
Okay. Tim.
Yeah, I don't know if I can top that one. So I had a similar answer, actually, is that if you're considering selling your business, it's probably a very interesting thing to be looking at ESOPs and to take your time on that. I think an ESOP does provide a nice landing spot for your employees. There's usually a fair amount of stability from a financial point of view as well as a management point of view that'll bode well for the company to carry on after the owner exits. And I'd agree with Tony that you do have to have patience, because as soon as you meet, once you decide you really like the candidate, then you're all about, let's get a deal done, and it's just going to take some time.
Kevin.
Yeah, great question, Rick. My motto is make the extra call, or make the call. If Tony or Tim see someone like Kurt, give them a call, get together, fly down to Chicago, have lunch with them, develop the relationship. Call your legal advisor, call your trustee, call your financial advisor, get people involved. People want to do the right thing, so make that call.
All right, Kurt.
Well, I guess from the seller's perspective is, always keep an open mind when you start the process. Make sure you're a good listener and you're communicating with the people you're dealing with, and I think that will always, lead to good things. In our case, it certainly did, and we're, very, very happy to be, part of a ESOP company today.
Okay. And then Sue, how about you as it relates to the topic today? Any last things you'd like to chime in on?
Well, I guess it's a pitch for MN CEO that, we have or can give people access to company stories like this and to professionals like Kevin and all the advisors, that we're not married to any one form of employee ownership. So, that makes it a lot easier for people to come to us as a resource. And we really believe in employee ownership. We think it's good for Minnesota. We believe it's good for America, for creating wealth equity for employees and giving the owners the satisfaction of leaving a legacy.
Okay. And then Sue, tell our audience how they can get more information from the MN CEO, as well as what is your email address?
Oh, so our website is www.mnceo.org, and we will just be rolling out a new version of our website next week, which will be exciting. It'll just be a lot more interactive and have a lot more to it. And my email is scrockett, that's CROCKETT, at mnceo.org. And I would be happy to put anyone in contact with any of these people here or any other company stories in your area. There are 650 ESOPs in the state of Minnesota, and we have access to them and can provide that to be able to find out from an owner and from an employee what the experience is really like, because this story is important, and that really is what sells the concept.
Okay. And then Sue, as our co-collaborator today with Club E, thank you very much. Anything else that you'd like to share with our audience about yourself, the group, anything else?
No, no, I think we're good. Unless there's anything any of the rest of the group wants to add, but we really appreciate being able to have the time to get this important message out to business owners and to the professionals advising their business owner.
All right, one last chance. Anybody want to chime in with anything? I don't see anybody raising their hand, so thank you very much for participating. Very insightful session, added a lot of value to our listening audience. Tony, Tim, Kurt, Kevin, Sue, thank you, and look forward to having you back to Club E sometime. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.